Hello, I'm John Carley. My interest in bird-friendly issues began in 2005 when I became a volunteer on the City of Toronto's Bird-Friendly Development Guidelines Working Group. I was the only practicing architect on that committee, a volunteer, as I said, and the guidelines were first published in 2007 and then were adopted by the City of Toronto in 2010 as part of their green standards. Later, I went on to produce best practices glass for the city, and in 2019 was a volunteer member of the Canadian Standards Association Committee, which produced document A460, Bird-Friendly Building Design. Last year, I went on the board of FLAP Canada. This talk is about mitigation, what works and what doesn't. To begin with, the word mitigation is rough in that it implies after-the-fact action to remedy a problem. I want to stress that solutions we discuss this morning or today, whatever time you're listening to this, are for both retrofits and for new construction. And I want to especially emphasize that for new construction, integrating bird-friendly measures into the design process will enhance your designs. I want to stress two items. One is an easy catchphrase. A green building isn't green until it's bird-friendly. Or put it another way, a sustainable building isn't sustainable until it's bird-friendly. The second is something that I will keep touching on, is that making a building bird-friendly will enhance your design. It's not a negative. Some of the best designs have bird-friendly measures integrated seamlessly into the building. This outline is what I hope to go through and explain coherently for you. To reiterate, simply put, birds cannot recognize that reflective and transparent glass are solid objects. To prevent collisions, we need to provide birds with visual cues that a barrier is present. There are a wide variety of attractive and effective design options on the market that can reduce the likelihood of birds striking windows. In this session, we'll go through the general types of mitigation options that are available for building retrofits or new builds and how new products are tested. We'll also look at how the designs can overcome some of the dangers to birds. Before we go on to what does and doesn't work, I wanted to test your preconceptions. This isn't an exam of any nature. There's no way I will ever know what you think, but just record yourself as I go through a few slides. Exterior elements, is this bird friendly or not? FALCON silhouettes, do they prevent bird strikes? Tinted glass? Patterns on glass, are these bird friendly? Interior screens? Frosted glass? Now just record your answers. Hopefully you've jotted them down and we'll come back to them. But first, I'm going to digress to ask the question, are bird strikes a recent problem? Historically, there probably were bird strikes on glass, but they were minimized. This is a photograph of the Campbell House in downtown Toronto. Note that the glazing has muntin bars and the panes are approximately about 12 inches by 8 inches. Right away, the glass surface has been broken up. Additionally, that house would have had insect screens, so because it obviously wasn't air conditioned back then, and those screens would have broken up the glass images behind. At institutional and commercial buildings, if you think about the older loft buildings in your downtown or in your communities, there were no large expanses of glass. The glass itself was imperfect in its manufacture. There were the insect screens, as I mentioned. And most of all, with both the Campbell House and with this example, the ratio of masonry to fenestration is evident. There's not a lot of glass in relation to the opaque surfaces of the building. And then we all fell in love with glass. This is Philip Johnson's glass house, very famous and completely devastating for birds, completely fly-through, reflective. You see the vegetation everywhere. And this came about because of glass manufacturing techniques. The glass became virtually perfect. Glass became available in very, very large sizes. Air conditioning started to happen, because if this house was air conditioned, it wouldn't exist. And on it goes. But you can see what we mean by the reflection of the exterior, and that a bird in these woods wouldn't have a chance. Something that I'm very aware of is that my profession, architecture, speaks of the myth of being one with nature. And this is the excuse that a lot of architects use to say that the resident inside, the inhabitant inside this building, is one with nature. And I argue they're not. That person inside is hermetically sealed from nature. They're not hearing anything. They're not having the bugs. They're not feeling the atmosphere. They're totally protected from nature. But my profession as a whole likes to say that we're one with nature when we're like this. So back to my question, what does and doesn't work? So let's go through these and see how you did, how you fared. So interior blinds, drapes, and screens don't work. They don't address the reflections on the outside of the glass. You're relying strictly on the building occupants to pull them or make sure they're there. And there's been no testing of this. But you come back to the point that the exterior surface is still reflective of the sky, of the vegetation nearby. So these are not effective. Angled glass. It had been thought that angled glass downward at 20 to 40 degrees could help prevent window collisions at ground level. But that's been proven incorrect. I remember when we did our first guidelines, this was an acceptable practice, but in the intervening 15 years, this has been determined to not be acceptable. Therefore, this strategy, if you use it in a design, you still need to protect the glass. Awnings and overhangs don't work. They simply don't eliminate the reflections. Tinted and colored glass, they are still reflective. And in fact, some tinted glasses, the blues and the greens, become even more attractive and look like a bird could fly into it. I also want to mention here that there is some super clear glass on the market that is transparent, and that is equally deadly, especially with buildings that have large atria with plantings in them. The birds see that and they just fly right for it and kill themselves on the glass. Bird deterrents, well, clearly this hasn't worked for this poor ovenbird. But other things, high frequency devices, noisemakers, cannons, the recordings of hawks or other birds of prey, and obviously plastic owls, they're proven not effective. Treatments on the inside of windows again, like curtains and drapes, don't work because the reflections of the exterior are still there. Birds just don't see a marker on that. Now, this is the one that I personally see most people talking about, and that's single window decals, or decals if you wish. It's often a peregrine falcon silhouette, but the point is that any visual markers spaced too far apart won't work. The bird of prey, for instance, doesn't scare the bird. The bird just flies, sees it as an obstacle, and flies beside it or around it. If one wanted to use bird silhouettes and one put them at the correct spacing, one would end up with a window like that. And that's certainly not our goal. To be effective, any marker or any way you're breaking up that reflection on the glass has to be applied to the entire exposed surface and meet Flap Canada's guidelines for visual markers, which are now on the screen. Ideally, the markers are simply 5 by 5 centimeters apart or 2 by 2 inches. The markers must stand out in contrast to the transparent or reflective glass, which means the color you select is very important. For instance, on clear railings, you probably want to go to black dots. White dots are frequently used on regular glass windows. Your marker has to be of a certain size. It can't be minuscule. A 1/4 inch is what we say here. You're covering the entire glass surface, as I mentioned, and notably, you're applying them to the exterior surface of the glass, face one. Now, when we say applying them, I'm presuming this is a retrofit situation. If it's a new construction and it's integral to the glazing, it still should be on face one. For those who are unfamiliar with this terminology, if you think of double paned windows, thermal units, and the exterior is shown as outside here, surface one is to the exterior, surface two and surface three front the spacer gap, and surface four is the inside surface facing into the office or the home. These guidelines of flaps are incorporated in the Canadian Standard Association's document A460, which is available currently for free viewing on the CSA website. Now, let's chat about what does work, because this is far more positive. Applied coverings and patterns on glass. This is an example of the Toronto Pan Am Sports Centre. This building was done when the City of Toronto standard was an 8-inch grid. That grid has now been reduced, of course, but here the architects were quite inventive and used a very pleasing graphic. I've referred to patterns of dots, and you've seen some already, but in fact, the pattern can be of any nature. Here, this is from George Brown College, and these are sort of pill-shaped or lozenge-shaped markers. So in this regard, whether it be a surface-applied material in a retrofit situation, or be it a pattern integral to the glass, both on face one, the pattern is only limited by your imagination and your design sense. There are also applied coverings, full window films. This is a product called Kaleidoscape, which is used at the Toronto Zoo. It's bird safe when it's on phase 1, and it has the opportunities to incorporate energy savings as well. The point about applied coverings, depending on where you are, they have to be able to withstand the climate conditions of your area. Integral applications are what we are advocating for new construction. Here is a glass balustrade on the main City of Hall Square. It's an etched pattern that's bird friendly, and it performs quite well. These patterns, there are a number of manufacturers who are now putting them on phase 1 on thermally glazed units, and that can be a very effective way of making your building bird friendly. Opaque and frosted glass can work, but most people don't, most architects, most designers don't put the frosting on the exterior because of the difficulty of keeping that clean. Glass block or glass bricks can work, depending, as long as there are small and strong patterns in that block. External coverings are very effective. It can be worked into your design. I've seen great buildings with full scrims, metal scrims that not only cut solar gain, but make the building bird friendly. The motorized shades, as we note here, are hard to enforce because the occupants may have them out of the way and forget to bring them down, and certainly while the shades are out of the way, birds are vulnerable to strikes. Netting is problematic. It's not recommended. It not only creates maintenance, it's a real entrapment hazard for birds. When I referred to screens on windows, they do break up the insect screens. They do break up the reflections behind, but a bird can still hit them. But they certainly do break up the reflections. Now, we've discussed the spacing of the visual markers and other ways that you break up the reflections. This is a poll that we used in our presentation to ask people where they felt the visual markers should be placed. Is it the whole building, which is A? Is it B, 16 meters, which is a height above grade? Is it up to a tree line? Or is it D, 16 meters above grade, or the mature tree line, whichever is greater? And the answer is D. What has been found from experience is that those first 16 meters of the building, about 55 feet or so, let's say the first 5 or 6 stories, that's the danger zone for daytime strikes. If you have a mature tree line higher than that, the danger zone is indeed still higher. On the West Coast, where you have generally taller trees than where I am here in Eastern Canada, your danger zone would be higher. I added these 2 slides because I want to speak about perceptions. With my fellow architects, the big elephant in the room, and it's a big elephant, is that people think that making a building bird friendly, their building bird friendly, will detract from the design. And I want to emphasize that there are some really nice buildings out there that are bird friendly, and you look at the design elements and you don't perceive per se that that's because the building has been made bird friendly. And I'm referring to scrims and shades and all the markers. Now, this is my own studio. I'm fortunate enough to live on a ravine, and it's a separate studio. I exist in 340 square feet of pretty nice surroundings. I treated all the glass with a 2-inch by 2-inch dot pattern, and to my knowledge, over 3.5 years, haven't had a strike yet. I've had clients to the building, and at the end of every meeting, I'll say, well, what do you think of the dots? And from the inside, they've even missed the fact that they're dots. But you can see from the second photo that yes, the dots are visible against the sky, against the greenery of the ravine in my garden. They're not at all visible. My sense is that just like light switches on your wall, the dots just become part of the background and that you really don't notice them. I am so used to them, I see beyond them. I think any attractive patterns, such as we showed at the Pan Am Games, some of the buildings in downtown Toronto are using their commercial markers, their logos to form the patterns. All of these are very essential. We've spoken about the daytime risk and that is the majority of strikes, but nighttime is still a danger zone for birds. And in fact, as one speaker mentioned earlier, FLAP originally started out thinking that it was always nighttime collisions that were the problem. And experience proved that nighttime was just one of the issues. This reducing your nighttime risks is a slam dunk issue. It's the easiest to achieve. It's the low-hanging fruit. It's plus, and this is the big plus, it saves an owner money in energy costs. It has the advantages of maintaining dark sky and avoiding light pollution. Simple things for interior lighting of a building, a residence, or whatever. Turn off the lights in unused interior spaces. Saves electricity, saves money. Draw your blinds when the spaces are occupied. Turn off the non-security overhead lighting. Encourage task lighting. If someone's staying late, encourage them to use task lighting, not light up the whole floor. Some firms have been able to switch to daytime cleaning of interior spaces. But if your cleaning staff have to go in the evening, have it on timers or motion set-offs so that they can clean per floor and not have to illuminate 5 or 6 stories of the tower. And certainly lights can be dimmed. All of these not only save birds, they save energy, they save the owner cost, they keep the skies dark. Exterior lighting needs to be put under control, particularly in the migration periods through the months of spring and the fall months. There are very famous examples of lighthouse effects where birds get into light and become so exhausted they fall to the ground. And certainly with the September 11th memorials, those columns of light are turned off to allow the birds to escape. There are some videos showing how the birds become entrapped in the spheres of light, and that's that fatal light attraction. So we would like everyone to use shielded downward directed fixtures. That also stops light pollution or abates it, and also maintains a dark sky. At best, limit your fixtures to grade, limit them to where you need them for safety and security, and if at all possible, prohibit those giant spotlights and illuminations through the migration months. I've spoken, hopefully, a lot about new construction, but I wanted to talk about a bit more because things that can be done in the design stage are equally important to making a building bird friendly. On the building envelope, and this is an example of a fully glazed building, but if you can reduce the amount of glazed surfaces, and that in a sense is going back to those historical examples I showed, where masonry or solid wall opaque surfaces was in a ratio with glass, and ideally 60% of the building surface being non-reflective materials. This example has been treated glass. This is in Toronto, the Ryerson Student Building, and it does do a terrific job of breaking up the patterns, as well as building envelopes. What we as architects do is often design in problems. We design fully open corners, which are real fly-through collision areas. You think about glass walkways that are glazed both sides. Glass railings are a real killer and need to be treated or have their design changed to metal or something else. Untreated windows in courtyards can be a real killer, because a bird that finds itself into an urban courtyard come dawn wants to escape, and the unfortunate thing is they'll see the courtyard vegetation reflected, and they'll fly into a window and kill themselves. Keeping in mind these issues, an architect can either choose to avoid them in the design, or if they are integral to the design, know that they must be treated and can take action to have them fritted, patterned, or something to break up those visual reflections. Finally, I wanted briefly to speak about the future of mitigation, in the sense that everyone has been looking for the magic answer. And there is a sense that ultraviolet patterned glass may hold hope in the future. Research is ongoing. This is all because light in the ultraviolet spectrum, as we say here, is invisible to humans, but visible to birds. It's visible at different frequencies, evidently. I'm not an expert in this, but to different species, it's different wavelengths. There are products on the market, but the evidence is mixed. This is a product used at York University called Ornolux. It's the Mikado pattern. You can see the pattern very vaguely, but the reflection is still there, unfortunately. And at York University, this building has had a very unfortunate track record. So until this aspect is refined, tested, and proven to be good, we at FLAP suggest it not be used. That brings my chat to the end, and thank you very much for listening all the way through. I hope that I've been helpful, and want to again say that if you have any questions, please contact us at FLAP Canada. We'd welcome your inquiries. We'd love to help. And thank you for your interest.